the goal has always got to be to prevent violence. And one of the best ways you can do that is, you got to extend the olive branch sometime and, try to sit down at the table with some of these guys and see, hey, what can we do to work this out where everybody stays in their own lane, everybody does their own thing, everybody's got their own little piece of the pie, as far as their territory is concerned, but without people getting shot up and stabbed and beat.
Hey, it's Lou Pimber. Welcome to Lou Pimber Speaks, author of the book Breaking Badly, my very own post-traumatic success story. I think we all have a story in us. You should write it. By the way, if you know anyone with a cool story or who wants to share their story, hit me up. Shoot me a message. I've gotten messages already from people. I've got some people lined up, incredible authors, just challenges in their life that they've overcome. I want to share those stories. So if you know anyone, I want to talk to them. So welcome to Lou Pimber Speaks. Speaking of stories, we have a gentleman here. He's not just a story. Legend has it that amongst the biker community, some bikers love him and some just love to hate him. So we got Detective Mr. Steve Cook here, the Kansas City metropolitan area cop, and have been very active over the last, I don't know how many years, he'll tell us right now, in the world of biker gangs and biker enforcement. Welcome, Steve. How you doing today, bud?
Brother, great to see you again, man. It's been too long.
Right on, man. It's good to see you, bro. Last time we saw each other, I think it was in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah.
And
Vegas.
you had asked me to come out and speak to a group out there. So thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate that. And so what have you been up to, man? Tell me, you've been a cop now how many years?
33 years.
33 years. Damn, that's a long time, bro. And how did you get into law enforcement, by the way? Who gave you that idea?
My whole entire family was involved in it. My dad was a chief of police. My brother was a cop. I had an uncle that was a cop. My wife was a cop. I mean, everybody I know is a cop. My best friend from kindergarten is a cop. So I just, I don't think I had an option. It just kind of happened organically.
So you've been a cop since kindergarten, basically, is what you're saying to me. You kind
I
of
feel
grew up
like
with
it.
the badge. Was your father a cop, you said, or no?
Yeah, yeah. He was a chief of police.
Was
So
your father a cop or no?
yeah, chief of police.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. What about your siblings? What did they do?
My brother was a cop. My brother's wife was a cop. My wife was a cop. My
Dang.
uncle was a cop. My best friend was a cop
Oh,
growing up. So pretty much everybody.
dang. Dang. So you had no choice, I guess, right? So you ended up becoming a cop. And was it everything you expected to be and more, or how did it turn out for you in the beginning?
I don't even know because I don't think I had really any expectations. It was just, you're young, you think you're going to do one thing. I thought I was going to, I raced cars and I thought somehow I was going to end up doing, NHRA drag racing. And obviously that didn't pan out, but I guess to a degree that it did because as a cop, chased a lot of cars and motorcycles and everything else. And I guess some of that driving ability probably came in handy.
I always told my wife, I said, hey, when she freaks out on the road, I said, honey, I am a trained driver. Calm down. I am
Exactly.
a trained driver. She doesn't believe me. See, we're trained drivers. So very cool. So Steve, what your specialty has been motorcycle gangs, right? And in the world of motorcycle gangs, here's what I always hear when I hear motorcycle gang. Every time someone says, this guy's with bandidos, or he's with the Huns, or he's with the Dirty Dozen, or he's with the Hells Angels, they always say, but I mean, they do a lot of community service. They do a lot of good for the community. They collect toys for tots, right? Do you hear that too?
I either hear that or I hear people say, "Oh, those guys are still around," and they, general public seems to be kind of clueless that some of these groups are still out operating and, operating at a high level.
What's the history on these motorcycle gangs? Like, what? I, my understanding is they got started. Just a couple guys want to hang out after Vietnam and ride bicycles and be free, and then they kind of evolved from there. Is that your understanding of it?
Yes. So basically, this all stemmed out of World War II, and it was returning more veterans. Ended up at an event that the American Motorcycle Association was hosting in Hollister, California, and they had some loose knit clubs at that time. And basically, there was an incident that occurred during that event. It was, kind of, I think, probably a little overstated in the media, but it was kind of akin to a riot of sorts, I guess, by 1940 standards. But out of that, these groups kind of evolved a little bit, and I think they went more from just being, brotherhoods of combat veterans to groups that got a little bit more involved in other activities, some not so legal activities. And over the course of time, there's still obviously
Yeah.
a military component to it, but I think over time it's just kind of morphed into, I think, something that was unintended.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it started out as a bunch of guys getting together, riding a bike, on a machine, much like they did in the military. You're on a machine, you're on a Jeep, you're on a Humvee, you're on a tank, and you have that esprit de corps. You're hanging out, rebel rousing, hitting the bars, right? Getting in a little bit of trouble. And I think other organizations or within the organizations, people say, hey, listen, we got kind of a clique right here, right? And then that led to other things like organized crime and stuff like that. That's the impression that I've gotten over the years from just kind of watching that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what happens, like with anything else, it only takes one or two bad apples to, spoil a bunch. And, these guys steer the ship in whatever direction they think it needs to go in. And the next thing you know, it might go from something, relatively harmless to something significant, something that, is resulting in violence and, drugs and a variety of other things that maybe some of these guys didn't really you know, get in it for.
And in your case, Steve, from what I know about you and I've read about you and I've seen, you've been featured on a couple networks, right? A couple TV shows, is that right?
But yeah, probably over a dozen over the last, decade or so.
Wow. Very cool. Here I thought I was on television. You've been on television more than I have probably, man. Right on, bro. So the work you've done have got has got a lot of recognition out there, man. You've obviously you reached the masses in the law enforcement world, but you've also ruffled some feathers in the motorcycle world. Is that true?
Without a doubt. Yeah, it's a very eloquent way to put it.
Yeah. Now, and in many cases, from what I understand, you've been on first name basis with some of the bikers, right? These leaders of the gang, right? And and some of them have taken a liking, some of them have not taken a liking. Is that correct?
Yeah, I kind of pride myself on being a little bit outside the norm. I've got pretty good, I think, business relationships with most of these clubs, where we can sit and have difficult conversations with one another, and I think that's important because obviously, from my side of the fence, from a law enforcement perspective, the goal has always got to be to prevent violence. And one of the best ways you can do that is, you got to extend the olive branch sometime and, try to sit down at the table with some of these guys and see, hey, what can we do to work this out where everybody stays in their own lane, everybody does their own thing, everybody's got their own little piece of the pie, as far as their territory is concerned, but without people getting shot up and stabbed and beat.
That's a very good point because I think diplomacy goes a long way amongst these guys. I've noticed that to their credit, these biker gangs, a lot of them do respond well to diplomacy. I've seen that. When a good law enforcement officer like yourself sees that, hey, listen, I'd rather be diplomatic about this than come in guns a blazing, right? I've seen it work out. And a lot of these guys, look, they may be criminals. Some of them may be criminals, but they're also family men, and a lot of them are businessmen, right? And they'd rather negotiate things out than have to get arrested and go to jail. And I think that's a good thing to do. What's what's been your experience with that? Do they respond well to you?
I think by and large, most of them do. You're always going to have your ones that don't, that just, you know, probably aren't in it for the right reason in the first place. And they don't have a desire to make things better. But I think there are some guys that legitimately are not looking for the problems because they know what the problems bring and, prison or, death, extreme situations. So I think some of those guys, they see it for
Yeah.
what it is and they'd like to be able to just, get along if they can.
In the years you've been investigating these bikers, by the way, what led you to bikers? What put led you in that direction? Was it the rallies? Was it the the parties that they have? Was it the girls? What led you to investigating the bikers?
My brother, when he was a cop, that was kind of his thing. He was always into it. And I think I just kind of picked it up off from him.
Yeah. Got it. I remember as a youngster, okay, as a kid, growing up in not so good environments. My dad was friends with all sorts of people. Okay, he had black dudes he was good friends with. He had the white boys he was good friends with. He had the bikers he was good friends with, and they'd all be around, right? And even in my own little intuitive little mind, I knew they were good but bad. You know what I mean? Like I knew these biker dudes they're just grown-up children in some cases, you know what I mean? Just wanting to be rebellious, wanted to be free and breaking the law, but at the same time, they wanted to just be like, "Hey, the everyman." So I've always wondered, like, it's sort of this interesting mystique about it, you know? What's been your experience with that side of it?
Well, I mean, I think it's a very unique, interesting subculture. And a lot of aspects of it make sense to me. And there's other aspects that don't, but I can see what draws people to it, especially guys that were in the military, because there is a paramilitary structure to it and a hierarchy. And so it's something that they can identify with and, something that they understand how it works. They understand coming in as a regular member and having people that they report to and then trying to, rise up in the ranks themselves to where they have a position of power. So I think it's comfortable in that regard. And I also think just because of the amount of, machismo involved in it and, the chest thumping and so forth. I think for a lot of these guys, it's just kind of a natural, you know, I went from being deployed with my brothers to I'm going to be deployed in the streets with my brothers, but we have a different enemy now. We used to, it used to be Al Qaeda, the Taliban. Now it's a rival club, another patch.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I can see how that would attract a lot of veterans like that because they give you that sense of camaraderie, that sense of adventure. I'd make a terrible biker. Just I don't like I like motorcycles, but I rather just look at them. You know what I mean? Too many accidents. I've seen them. But I totally get that. Totally get that. Uh, but the truth is, though, within that culture is that subculture of just criminality, plain old murder, extortion, drug dealing, and that's when law enforcement has to take action, right? And tell me about your experience in that area.
Well, I think you've got basically two types of individuals get involved in these groups. You've got people that get involved potentially for the right reasons or for what they think are the right reasons. And then you do have people that get involved flat out for the criminal side because they think it's going to be an enhancement to them criminally. And in some cases, it is. I mean, the fact that you've got an infrastructure, you've got, you know, a patch that's got a reputation attached to it, people are going to be less like to cross you with something like that. But I think with the guys that really get into it with bad intentions, they're going to find bad things. And I think a lot of times your violence and things like that, it boils right down to that, where they get so obsessed with this mindset that, we are the dominant group in a particular area. And in reality, they could probably not have to work too hard to avoid another group but they go out and seek them out because they want that conflict. They want, basically they want to be able to, put their stamp on these guys and say, we're the toughest in the schoolyard. And I think that's where we run into the majority of our problems. I mean, we're always going to have the drug dealers, we're always going to have the felons with guns and the guys that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But I think at the core of it, the just large scale violence where they're doing things in public venues, that's the biggest threat to everyone, especially to the general public.
And are they as organized as people think that they are, or that some movies make them to be? Are they that organized?
Yeah, they're absolutely organized. They're a lot different than your traditional street gangs where, you could have a set of Bloods in East LA. They don't know any of the Bloods in Kansas City, Missouri, or in Omaha, Nebraska. That they're operating off the same name, but they're fragmented. That's not the case with your large. Use the Vagos for example. No, the Vagos, they've got a hierarchy. They're international. They've got, their mother club guys. They oversee the local chapters in different places. And, things go up the chain. Things go up the chain, things go down the chain. But, they've got everybody's got a common set of bylaws that they follow. There's a membership process to join, there's background checks involved, sometimes, polygraphs and things like that. So, yeah, they're a lot more sophisticated, I think, than people even give them credit.
Damn, they have a background check. So how bad do you have to be let in, or how good do you have to be to get let in? What are they looking for?
Well, I
Bad
think
credit?
as far as the background check, candidly, they're making sure you're not a cop or an informant. That's what they're really looking for, is
Right,
to check your
right.
references, check your sources, and make sure somebody that they would deem that's undesirable wouldn't be getting into the ranks.
Wow. So they've learned their lessons. They've learned their lessons over the years. We have a friend in common, Jay Dobbins, and other guys, Bayless, a lot of those guys that have infiltrated these groups, and many other cops, to their credit, I just don't know their names, but they've been successful at infiltrating these groups to a certain level, you know? And so they got, I guess the bikers have to be careful, right? And
Yeah.
the um the leadership in these biker gangs, how long does this guy stay in power? Is he like, is there a term limit on these guys, or is he just there as long as he's alive, as long as he can lead, like a wolf pack?
It really varies. A lot of times what happens is the leaders get indicted and get taken off the board. So that's what we see mostly for turnover purposes, is just guys that are getting charged criminally and are getting removed from the organization that way. Usually what happens is these guys get indicted because they're the head of the snake for the organization. So they get taken off the chessboard and they're replaced at that point. Every once in a while, somebody will get removed and replaced, but more often than not, I would say, like if you look at the Outlaws, for example, I think like five, maybe of their last six international presidents has been indicted in RICO charges. So that's a pretty good run for you know not wanting that position, I would think, but guys keep taking.
So RICO, racketeer influence corrupt organizations, that became cops' best friend. I remember when that first came out, and I was newly in law enforcement, but I had been a military criminal analyst before that, learning that stuff. I mean, can you explain how law enforcement has been using RICO to dismantle some of these organizations?
Yeah, so like both RICO and Vicar, which is violent crime in aid of racketeering, they're great tools for law enforcement. They obviously both require federal sponsorship, but what's great about them is whereas at the local level, the state prosecution level, a lot of times if there's an incident, they might charge one or two people. With the racketeering laws, it enables you to charge everybody. So anybody that was involved in an incident, you can charge. Whereas sometimes the state would require a different burden, if you will, because of how their laws are written. Like we need the person that actually put hands on somebody. Whereas from a racketeering standpoint, if you were involved in the planning of putting hands on somebody, you're in it as much as the guy that did it. So I think that's the big difference, and I think it's a great tool. I know it was established for the Italian mafia, but I think it's
Yeah.
been used more on bike gangs than it has been on the mafia.
Right, 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 right. And it's been a great tool to help in these conspiracy cases, because oftentimes it can just be a conspiracy case, right? But when they implement the RICO statutes in there, things get a little bit more serious, it sounds like. Um, and with you guys, are you guys hemming these guys up on conspiracy charges, or you guys using RICO, or on an individual basis, just kind of based on what you guys have on hand?
It's a case by case. A lot of times, we'll pick guys off on just small charges. And when I say small, I don't mean that they're not important. It's just, you might get them on a single count felon in possession case or a possession with intent to distribute meth, cocaine, something like that. And then, of course, when you have your larger incidents where there's violence involved, that's where you might start, branching out and incorporating into these more complex investigative techniques.
Yeah, these guys are pretty sophisticated. I mean, and I mean, they got violence, extortion, prostitution, drug dealing, murder. They're like a one-stop shop, man. So, is there in your state of Kansas City, what are the most prominent gangs out in your area? Biker gangs.
But, there's several. I mean, you've got pretty much all majority of the big ones. Groups like Banditos, Mongols, Pagans, uh, you know, Sons of Silence, just for an example. But yeah, more groups in Missouri. I think as far as the Big Eight is concerned, I think seven of the Big Eight are in Missouri. So, uh,
Wow.
statewide, it's pretty well saturated.
Yeah, that's insane. What about the Mayans? Are they out there at all?
Haven't seen any
No
Mayans
Mayans.
yet, but
It's just on the reruns. Just on the reruns.
yeah.
Now, in terms of in your years of in your 30 plus years, in the world of law enforcement, in the world of investigating these gangs, right? These motorcycle gangs, has the culture changed? Has it? Meaning, in my opinion, I don't know, maybe because I'm a Gen Xer, right? We used to we used to you know dirt bike and we ramp and we jump over each other like evil can evil. You know what I mean? Is the generation of biker today the same generation of biker of the 70s, 60s, and 80s? Have you seen a difference in their style and their thinking?
It's totally different. And I always tell people, and I'm sure it ruffles feathers, but I was fortunate enough to get in on the tail end of the shift. But I tell guys nowadays, yeah, you might say that you work bikers, but you don't work bikers like we used to work bikers because they're not the same. There's so much patch jumping now that goes on where you've got guys that are in three, four, five different clubs over a few year period of time. So there's no loyalty there where that's involved. And the difference is when I started doing this, nobody cooperated. That was an anomaly. It would happen once in a blue moon, but it was not common. Nowadays, it happens all the time. It's easier for me to tell you who's not cooperating versus who is, because again, and I hate to say it, but it's a lot like what we see in law enforcement nowadays is the
Yeah.
mindset's different. When I started, there was no question that this was a lifetime commitment as far as career wise, I was gonna do my
Right.
30 plus years, and that was that. People we're hiring right now don't see it that way. They're, piecing out after 2 and 3 years and going and doing something else, and it's the same thing with the clubs because back in the day, it was common to see a lot of 25, 30-year members, and that's becoming a lot less frequent now because guys are getting in, it's fun for a while, and then when it gets too real for them and they're like, "Oh, wow, I might go to jail," or, "This is getting a little too violent for my taste." They just drop their patch and go off and do something else. So it's a completely different culture than it used to be.
So everybody wants to do biker stuff until it comes down to doing biker stuff. right? It's
That's
like
that's the reality. Yeah.
they want to wear the badge t- until it's time to do stuff that you got to carry the badge, you know? Wow. I never thought of it that way, man. And what do you think it is? You think we just have a are we just being the old guy? Like the old guy when we were a young guy, and the old guy used to say, well, when I was a cop in the 80s, things were different. You don't know what it's like to be a cop, you know? Are we just being the old guy of like, well, the bikers back then were really true bikers. Today's bikers aren't bikers. They maybe you heard that when you were young. I don't know. Are we just being the old guy?
Don't think so because I've even had young bikers tell me that who had, fathers and uncles that were in the club and guys that have been around it since they were kids, and they'll even tell you it ain't the same. It's not like it used to be. This isn't what I grew up around. It's totally different. And I've had some good chats. I've got a lot of friends that used to wear patches with a variety of different clubs. And
Yeah.
it's pretty universal. They've all kind of got the same take on it as far as, what it was versus what it is. And the fact that, yeah, you brought up Mayans earlier, but, you're not really far off is that Sons of Anarchy mentality. A lot of these guys think that they're getting into these clubs, uh, and it's going to be just like the TV show. They're going to be out,
Right.
shooting people up on the highway and doing all this stuff. And they try to carry it over into real life, and we see it. We see it happen.
It it ain't like Hollywood. It ain't like Hollywood, you know. It isn't. There's this Hollywood bikers, and then there's the real hardcore bikers, and then the guys who come in and get surprised and they leave, right? They leave. The and you say the same culture, you've seen it in law enforcement as well?
Yeah, I think the whole law enforcement culture is different now too. When I got on the job, 33 years ago, you got in the job, I'm sure just like you, and I know how it's going to sound, but the reality of it is you got in it to bang heads, of guys that needed to go to jail. Your job was to go out and hunt them and get them off the streets so they didn't victimize innocent people. That was the job. And, nowadays you flip on social media and guys are lip syncing and pretending like they're Beyonce uh, on social media. It's embarrassing. I mean, obviously, but
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
that. It's like people lost their way somewhere along that. And I know a lot of good, young, hard charging cops. I mean, that want to go out and do the job, but the reality of it is, you can't do the job the way you used to because they've kind of handcuffed the police. Uh, some of these states, I don't even know how these people stay in law enforcement because you see stuff that goes on in Washington State and places like that. It blows my mind because, yeah, I talk to some of these cops sometimes. They come to training and things like that, and they they're just blown away about even how we do things versus what they're allowed to do. It's almost like bizarro land.
It's the some call it the wussification of America, I guess. Wussification of police work, maybe. Or maybe it's just that people have too many options today, and with that comes many distractions. Yes, I cringe when I see a cop doing the nay nay or doing the whatever on social media. They've taken community policing too far, man. Your job is to be friendly, yes, serve and protect, but the ultimate job of a cop, and you know this, Steve, which is why people like you and I and others got into law enforcement, is to go get the bad guy. That's what our job is, because no one else is going to do it but us, so that people can rest easy. We have to go do the job, and it takes rough men to go do that.
It does,
So
and
that
you
you can see that
also,
a lot.
and yet you also, you diminish your own um, persona, your command presence, your professionalism, because bad guys don't respect that, and they look at you as soft. So they're going to
They do.
challenge you because they look at you as like, hey, you're not a guy who's going to, you know, uh, tie up with me, if it comes to that. So they definitely take note of that, and I think that's another, danger. But to your point. and about, pussification, not to get too far off topic, but I was literally watching I have an old uh, streaming station that just all it does is play the classics, like old Johnny Carson reruns, things like that. And this morning I was watching the Man of the Year presentation for Muhammad Ali. And I
Okay.
mean, it had all the greats, Sherman Hensley, Rob, what was that guy's name? Not Rob. Gosh, I can picture him. He was in Casino. I'm just Don Rickles is what I'm trying to say.
Don
Don Rickles
Rickles.
was there. Howard Cosell. I mean, you name it. The list goes on and
Yeah.
on. Even the guy from Welcome Back, Kotter, was on there. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of what you would probably say are off-color jokes going on
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
everybody there. Everybody was laughing, having a good time, and guess what? Nobody was butthurt about it. Nobody was offended. They knew it was in good fun. They were poking at
Yep.
each other. Ollie even took a half-hearted swing at Cosell. It was all in good fun, and we've gotten so far away from that now that people don't even know how to function. Everything is just a triggered event in some people's lives, and until they fix that, things aren't gonna get any better.
Yeah, that's definitely leaked into the world of law enforcement for sure. Well, most definitely. You have to be so careful and you have to look. I get we have to be professionals, but the job makes you, if you're not already, if you stick around long enough, it's going to make you a rough person, and you have to be part diplomat and part warrior when you're a cop, because one minute you have to deal with what you seem to think is an insignificant civil matter, but this little old lady is super important to a stark raving lunatic running around naked with a machete. And you have to attract people, you have to recruit people, you have to have men and women in uniform who can deal with that, who
Yep,
can deal
you're
with that. And
exactly
it is a
right.
very challenging, very challenging. And so, how many years do you have left, Steve? When will you retire, man? I thought you had already retired.
I've got a little time left this year, and but the thing is, I'll keep a commission. I won't be working full time, but I'll keep a commission just so I can kind of keep dealing with some of this motorcycle stuff because it's kind of
Yeah,
if I don't, who will type situation. And
yeah,
you build a lot of relationships over that amount of time. And, a lot of these guys come to me with things and, not that they're allowed to or supposed to, but I have had guys and, club members call me and obviously, hey, if the club knew I was talking to you, this would be an issue, but I need some advice. I'm having a, you know, domestic issue or I'm having a child custody issue. And that just shows me that the amount of respect that I've shown them and that they show in kind is they would respect me enough that they respect my opinion and judgment on something that again has nothing to do with their organization, but it's a life issue that they need solved. And they not only respect me, but they trust me that I'm not going to air their laundry to somebody else and say, "Hey, so and so in your club called me and was asking me questions." That they know I'm not going to do that. So uh,
right, right,
I,
right.
I think that's I think that's important. I think relationships are important, and I think I've more than done my share of fostering and building that. And I don't intend to stop doing that. I'm gonna keep training, young cops and try to get them in the right state of mind to address issues like these. But I also want to continue to work with some of these groups and see if we can find some middle ground, some common ground. I always tell them we don't have to like each other, but we can respect one another. There's nothing wrong with that. And, we can maybe find somewhere to meet in the middle where it's mutually beneficial to both sides and it keeps the violence in check at the same time. So that should be a win-win for everyone.
For sure, man. For sure. Boys will be boys, right? And we need to know how to get along with the good guys, get along with the bad guys, because ultimately we have to live together. And it says a lot about your character, Steve, and your experience that they're willing to reach out and say, "Hey, man, how do I process this issue?" Because you know what? A lot of the root causes why they are where they are is they didn't have that connection with someone growing up. And props to you for doing that, man. Props to you for doing that. So what's next, man? You're gonna be sticking around for a little bit, retiring here soon, but kind of stick around as a kind of an advisor. It takes a lot of work to put together what everything you've done.
Yeah, yeah, I plan to do that. I already do that anyway, so that'll be something that continues. And at some point, I mean, I don't know. I might do some Lou Pimber movies. I mean, at least as an extra. I mean, I could be that guy in the background. So
There you
I
go. There
I
you
always
go,
look
man.
forward to that.
There you go. Yeah. I just did a movie with Danny Trejo, man. You could have been in that one with us, brother. the but you have that training company. What is it called again? Your
Heartland,
organization?
yeah, Heartland Law Enforcement Training Institute.
Heartland Law Enforcement Training Institute. So when you put that together, it's usually in Las Vegas or someplace like that, and you provide cops. What is it? 3 or 4 days of training, and you bring in speakers and you offer training yourself.
Yeah, yeah, we do a variety of different, you know, training topics. I mean, some that cater to more undercover type, operations. We do, obviously motorcycle related stuff. We do firearms investigations. So kind of a variety of different things, but uh, you know, basically stuff that goes all the way from entry level to advanced, just depending on where somebody's coming from, in their career. But basically, just career development stuff that will hopefully bring these guys along. And we've got a lot of really, uh, you know, expert speakers, guys like I'm sure Lou Velozzi, that was
Yes.
ATF agent, but
Yeah.
guys like that work for us that are highly trained, highly sophisticated in their fields. So yeah, we try to bring that you know to places to where whether it be doing it in a big location like Vegas or Orlando or something like that. A lot of times we'll just take it to individual agencies so they can contract out. We can kind of show up there and do a class with them.
Got it, got it. And I've been honored to have been invited to do that with you guys. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that. And I always love to be an advocate for the men and women in law enforcement. And you have prosecutors there too. I saw there was some prosecutors there as well. And so, I love it. One of the biggest things I'm a big advocate of is the mental health in law enforcement and in life post law enforcement. You know, it's just weird, man. When you leave, all of a sudden you start seeing things differently, you start thinking things differently, so, thank you for having me there. Steve, where can people find you? I mean, the bikers have your phone number. Can we get your phone number? Where can people find you should they want to maybe send their cops there for one of your classes, which are great, by the way. I've been to them. You bring in some great people. Where can they find you on social media? Where at?
I think if they just get on, look for Heartland Law Enforcement training on the internet, they can find our company website. Is a good place to start. Obviously, they could reach out, on social media to me personally. So, yeah, I kind of like to say I'm not hard to find, but yeah, so that's always a thing. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's something that we were literally just talking about. I was teaching down in Ormond Beach, Florida, and we were literally talking about that for about an hour in class. Is a lot of these young cops don't understand that tomorrow's not guaranteed in this profession. And if you don't
Right.
have a backup plan, you don't have a side hustle, you don't have something in play that you can go into, you might be in a real bad spot. And it could be a duty related injury, or it could be some kind of incident that goes wrong that can result in somebody getting prosecuted or something like that. But the reality of it is, tomorrow you could not be a cop anymore. And if that's the only thing and the only thing that you do, and you haven't, I don't care what it is, you don't have to be a movie star like you or, trainer like me. But you could build decks or you could remodel basements or whatever it is that you do, but you should have that established on the side and have a plan for what it looks like if, the next day you're out of a job.
Big time, man. I was able to bounce back after having to medically retire from police work, and it was a tough gig for me for a while, man. And I mean, I found movies and television and stuff like that, and I'm also a business owner. You know, might as well just plug right now my sponsor, the 212 Financial Group, owned by yours truly. You know what I mean? And I learned how to help process retirement plans and protect rollovers, 401ks, life insurance, college funds. That's what helped me reinvent my life as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. I sought out mentorship from people as well. I had to humble myself a little bit, say, okay, teach me something new because I can't go back and do that anymore, you know? And so yeah, we're always looking for people. I have a few cops that are part of our organization that are doing good, man. So Steve, thank you for meeting with me today, brother. I really appreciate it. I follow what you do. I've seen you on a couple other interviews. You're doing great work amongst the biker community. Some love you, some love to hate you, right? And so that means you're doing a good job, man. Keep up the good work. We're gonna stay in touch. And you, if you're watching, subscribe, like, share. If you know anyone out there with an incredible story, I want to share their story right here. People need to hear it. You might inspire somebody. America needs inspiring right now. Talk to you soon.